There are things I really, really like about Gary Vaynerchuk, but he's not my guru. You know, I don't have to agree with him on everything that he's.
Welcome to your Next Six Figures podcast. Here to smash through that barrier and give you the business your hard work deserves. Is your host, coach, consultant, and author, Marc Ford.
Today's guest absolutely loves talking about influence and persuasion, especially in public speaking and presentations. So it's fortunate that he's on this podcast then, really. He has been helping professionals around the world grow and develop as public speakers, which I obviously need a lot of tips on, coaches and trainers for over 12 years, and is hugely respected by his clients and his peers. Now, he is also helping purpose-driven coaches and speakers leverage the power of podcasting through his work and his brand new book, Podfluence. Ladies and gentlemen, meet podcast host and award-winning speaker, Mr. Johnny Ball. How are you, Johnny?
Hey, Mark, that was quite an introduction. I'm flattered and very honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you so much for your time. All the way from sunny Valencia, all the way here to sunny Leicester. And it is sunny, which is probably the first day this year. But thank you so much for doing this. So, Johnny, tell us a little bit about your background. So before we press record, you gave me a little bit of an insight into your background and how you've got to write this book. So tell everybody a little bit about how you've got to this point of writing this book.
Well, I'll give you the potted history because I think the full version is probably a bit too long and more than we have time for. But after 15 years in coaching, the last 10 or 11 of that has been full-time as a coach, mainly working with Harv Eker International, with anyone's ever read Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, that guy. And so that's been a lot of fun, and I've really sort of found my feet. But on that journey, I really discovered and got more and more into public speaking and love being able to present and speak to people. So I still do a lot of that, but podcasting has come along and been this thing where I could just find an audience. I can say what I want to say or speak to the people who I want to speak to. And that has been a really wonderful thing. I think there's a lot of value in podcasts. I am a big audiobook person. I listen to maybe 2 or 3 audiobooks a week, depending on how long they are. And I'm the kind of guy who listens to them on double speed or triple if I can get away with it, because I just like getting the information and getting the learning, getting through those. And so podcasting was a natural progression from that for me. It was just something that was very interesting and a way to have conversations with some of those people who are writing the kinds of books that I'm reading and other people who just have interesting things to say or points of view. So it's been a massive development. What started as a Toastmasters project ended up becoming something that has been, well, now is a deep passion in my life that I don't think I will ever want to stop doing.
I mean, podcasting is sort of like, it's not come out of nowhere, has it? I mean, podcasting has been around for quite a few years. I mean, I started this podcast actually in various different guises about 6 years ago, something like that. And it's almost like it's become, I don't know whether it was because of lockdown, but it's almost like over the last 2 to 3 years, it's very much become a revolution. Is it currently going through an evolution as we speak, or is it still revolution?
I can only give my perspective on that because I don't have all the information in podcasting, but I can also say I do speak regularly on my show to people who are much higher up the food chain in the podcasting world, who do have some insights. But interestingly, many of them have some different perspectives as well. Yes, I think podcasting is going through an evolution. And one of the things I find myself saying a lot at the moment is that podcasting is where YouTube was maybe 10 or so years ago. We are now at a differentiation point where people can no longer really get away with just creating the material and throwing it out there. It actually needs to be good. It needs to have some production value to it, and it can't just be, unless you're just doing it for fun and you don't care about listeners and things like that, you just throw any old stuff out. But if you do, especially if it's a business related podcast, you can't go out there and be boring. You can't go out there and not have a clear message unless if you do that, you're probably going to do yourself more damage than good.
You see, that's really interesting. One of the people that you quote quite regularly in the book, Gary V, good old Gary V, he suggests that basically we should just be chucking as much content out there as possible rather than consuming content. Do you kind of like, obviously you're an audiobook kind of guy. I'm an audiobook kind of guy, and I've got my podcasts as well that I listen to. Do you subscribe to that sort of like that way? Because I think you can. I was going to say you can probably get so many different ideas from so many different podcasts.
There are things I really, really like about Gary Vaynerchuk, but he's not my guru. You know, I don't have to agree with him on everything that he says. And this be there, be everywhere kind of approach that he has is certainly not my approach. I think for most people it's a recipe for burnout, and I have this conversation quite regularly with clients or people who follow me who come and ask me, and I say, I'm doing this, I'm doing all these things, I'm on all these places, I'm doing all these lives, I'm making all these podcasts, I've just started another one. Like, why the heck are you doing all that? You're just adding more and more work for yourself and making life really tough, and you're on a recipe for burnout. So I think you have to be careful when you take advice like that. It's like, that may not exactly be what Gary Vaynerchuk means by that. He has a team behind him who can help him be everywhere on all these platforms. If you don't have that and you're trying to do all of it yourself, and you've got maybe already a podcast that isn't really getting the downloads and the results for you, or isn't generating leads, and if that's your intention for it, why would you start another one? Because that's not going to do it. If you can't make this one do it, at least stop that one and maybe try a different one if that's what you need to do. But just adding on more and more things onto the pile is definitely a recipe for disaster in my books.
I was going to say, again, it was a conversation that we had before we press record. Are you seeing more and more business owners just looking at podcasts as almost like a magic wand, in a way that they assume that as soon as they put a podcast out there that they are popular enough to get thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of listeners, and actually, they start the podcast and they suddenly disappear after about 4 or 5 episodes because, quite frankly, it's not as easy as they thought it was.
There's a thing I see here in Spain where I live that I've always found kind of bizarre. I don't think I ever saw it so much in the UK, where people open up bars and restaurants without any real marketing, and they just open it and assume that the customers are going to come. And I think a lot of people have that attitude with podcasting. It's like, well, if I make it, then the audience will come and find it. And they won't. Like, podcast is still one of those areas that is actually struggling with searchability. And whilst there are things happening in that zone that are making it a bit easier to find podcasts and the likes, and certainly a lot more podcasts are going onto YouTube, which is in itself a search engine. It makes a lot of sense to do that. Yeah, you're more likely to have a bit of discoverability, but also as soon as you talk about YouTube, you're also talking about times 10, times 100, much more competition. It's a much thicker market. And again, the chances of you actually being found without good keyword research, without good SEO, without good quality production, if you don't have all the things that you need to make whatever you're putting out interesting or engaging or fun for people, whatever it needs to be to attract the audience that you want, then you're wasting your time probably, and quite likely wasting your money.
So let's go to the book. All right, is this your first book?
It's my first completed book. It's not my first.
I like that. I'm very similar. There are like 2 or 3 that have sort of like been a third written or something like that, and then I've obviously got bright light syndrome where I've gone, oh look, there's a shiny thing over there.
Yeah, my issue I think with books before has been a bit of perfectionism, and doing this whole thing of getting really swamped into research, and then the book ends up becoming much less exciting, and ultimately ends up being too much of a weight when there's so many other things as a business owner that you have to give your time and attention to. This one I was just determined to plow through it. I mean, it really was from inspiration from other people who I've had on my show and who have got their books out, saying commit to your writing, commit to doing it regularly, and get a book out there. And rather than doing a book that you can research, why not do the book that's already in your head, the book that you can get out there, and you can always add citations and add research elements in afterwards, but get the bloody thing written in the first place. Okay,
so what have you learned? So obviously, this is the first one that you've completed. We'll go back to podcasting in a second, but I'm always intrigued what people learn about themselves 9 times out of 10, actually, when they're writing their first book or their first completed book in your case. What's the biggest learning that you've learned from actually writing this book?
How hard it can be to stay on topic. I think I don't generally have such an issue with that. But a book has to make sense, and a book has to have an order, and it's very easy. And I find this with my writing in general, because I do blog writing as well, that you have to make sure that whatever the theme or the question is, or whatever you're talking about, is actually what you end up talking about. Because our brains, especially if you have an active brain, want to go off at tangents quite often. And so we sometimes may struggle to bring ourselves back, or even at some point, what was the question? What was I talking about? And you can realize you've been sat there writing for an hour or more and completely gone off topic. So that kind of thing, that was a real lesson for myself of, you have to make sure you stay on point, stay on target, and keep going towards what you're actually trying to achieve there. So it was really important to have that structure, to have that outline, and to know what I was writing about and what my intention was for the person reading it all the way through. And I don't think I'd ever really approached my writing in that way before.
Like I said, I'm always fascinated, because there's an awful lot of people out there that do write books, and it was really interesting that you've sort of like said the intention for the person that's reading it, and I love that on the basis that you've obviously written it, and it is a labor of love, but you've written it in the fact that it has the end user in mind, as opposed to, look at me, aren't I clever, I've written a book, and it sell 5 copies, things like that. And I think that's hugely commendable. And it's like, if I was wearing a cap, I would doff it to you right now.
I think the same issue applies to podcasts, though, because they are both things where you could very easily become self-indulgent, and there is a risk. There's always a risk of doing that, and it may not, even with the best of intentions, that can end up happening. That you end up writing or delivering the content that you want, rather than what people actually need or what's going to help them or benefit them.
Absolutely. So when people buy Podfluence, all right, I love that name, by the way. When they buy that, what are you hoping they're going to get out of it? What do you want that end user to get when they put that book down? What are the top 2 things that they're going to get out of this book?
The goal of the book, my mission, if you like, with it, is that people who have a message, people who have skills or tools or messages that could actually impact people's lives positively and maybe even change the world, have the tools and the resources to be able to get out there and become a key person of influence, to become a thought leader and somebody who is known for what they do. So that is what I want people to take away from that. And hopefully at the end of the book, they will come away realizing that they can do that, one, by being a guest on podcasts to an extent, but mainly by starting their own show and having their own voice out there as well.
So if you were going to give one tip, golden rule, I'm new to podcasting, I want to podcast. What is the one golden rule that you would give to them right now?
Make sure that you actually really want to do this. And so that would probably be the first thing. Make sure you really want to do it, because most people, you have to check in with your purpose for it, I suppose. So if it's that you want to do it and you, as we were talking before, you suddenly want to have loads of followers, you're probably not going to stick with it, because it takes such a long time. Unless you already have a big following, it takes such a long time to build audience on podcasts. And it's one of the reasons why I don't really so much talk about the marketing side of it, because I think there's other areas that there's plenty of people talking about that already. But golden rules are do it for the right reasons. Do it because you're going to enjoy it, because you have a mission, because you have a message. And that probably is the most important thing. And if you are not doing a business related podcast, do it because you love talking about the subject that you do have your podcast about, or you love creating stories and getting them out, sharing those with people. But do it for the right reasons, not because you could make a lot of money with it, or because maybe someone else will buy the rights to your podcast. Maybe Spotify will hear it and think, oh, I want you. It's ifs and buts and maybes that probably will never happen for most people.
Do you know what? I love the fact that you're encouraging people to really want to do it. I accidentally came, and this is a true story. I actually came across an audio only podcast, all right, about wallpaper.
Wow.
I mean, that is some tough gig. That is, isn't it? I mean, let's be perfectly honest. This is a lovely wallpaper. It's floral, and it's like, really? honestly, how can you describe wallpaper just audio wise? I mean, I know the BBC has sort of like probably done it and they've got skills and commentators and stuff like that. I just thought genuinely you must love wallpaper or you really do want to go for the toughest gig on planet Earth. You really do.
But it just shows that there is pretty much a market and audience for just about anything. And being niche in a podcast is going to help you more than anything else. Maybe you don't be ultra specific with your niche, but being fairly specific is going to make a difference, is going to help you.
So as we come to an end and sort of finish up, where do you see podcasting going in the next 5 years? I mean, it's like I said before, it's had a massive revolution. And you're absolutely right. I do think there's an awful lot still to come from podcasting, both on YouTube and audio wise. I'm waiting to see if any of the big media companies really pick up on what's actually going on in the world of podcasting. Where do you see it going over the next 5 years?
I think we will see more and more people finding that they can make a business in podcasting and make a career here, and deciding that they want to do that this is a medium which they can really utilize and work with. I think we'll see more professional style podcasts, more people doing podcasts with their business or even corporate stuff. I just see it becoming a more and more common and even a normal thing for business owners and companies to have their own podcasts. So that from the professional side of things, I can't really talk much about like true crime or entertainment sort of podcasts, because that's not really what I'm in, at least not at the moment. Although I do want to do some entertainment based stuff in the future, but I do think it's a great vehicle for people who do want to at least have their voice being heard, at least in one way or another, to push themselves out there. As much as public speaking could be, it's getting yourself out to a much wider platform, giving yourself potentially much more bang for your buck, and developing, hopefully, a loyal following. So I think that's still more so. I think we'll see more paid stuff, we'll see more private podcasts and things like that. So it's going to be interesting, but yeah, it's probably going to go more the way that YouTube has gone.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And you talking about the norm, I don't know whether you get it in Spain over there, but on BBC quite recently, there's a third and final, I believe, series of The Split on there, and it's based around lawyers, divorce lawyers, and this series was incredibly prominent in virtually every single episode, 10 episodes or something like that. There is this high-powered law firm in London doing a podcast on divorce, and I sat there, and it sort of took me back a little bit at the beginning of the series, but by the end of the series, I just went, I really hope there are more lawyers doing this. I really do. I just thought it was a great way of, aside from the drama, it's a great way of marketing, what you do so well. But it was the first time that I'd seen it in a drama and in entertainment as almost like a normal thing.
Yeah, imagine. I mean, it would be, if you're a podcasting coach, and there's a lot more of those popping up now, it would be a great niche for you to go into. I already know someone who's doing that with mortgage brokers, and yeah, absolutely.
Wow, mortgage. Oh, that's going to be a tough gig. A bit like accountants. That's also, there's no way you can make accounts sexy. Not a chance. And that is me throwing the gauntlet down to people out there. If they do want to make accounts sexy and make it sexy on a podcast, please get in touch. I will gladly have you on this podcast so you can make it sexy and make me slightly interested in it. But until then, it's not happening.
There could be other reasons. There could be other reasons to listen to an accountancy podcast. It could become like a sort of ASMR, like put people to sleep, like your eyes are glazed open. It's like
apps like Calm and Robson and Jerome from Robson and Jerome are really worried about that right about now. They really are. They can see their revenue flying out the door. They really can. Dude, when is this book out and where is it going to be available?
It is going to be out this summer, and so I'm aiming for July, August time to have this released, and just doing some of the editing work on this at the moment. It is going to be available on Amazon initially as a download, and then as an audiobook. You'll be able to order a print version of it as well for those who like to have a real book in their hands. And if people want to get some advanced copy of that, I'll have some, once it's ready, I'll have some advanced chapters for people to be able to come and get a bit of headway on that. If people want to come and follow me on social media, then that's where I'll be sharing it with everyone.
That is exactly what my next question was going to be. Where can people find you? Can they find you on your website? Obviously, all this sort of stuff will be in the show notes as well. But tell people where they can follow you and find you, my friend.
Well, you can actually join the Facebook group Podfluencers, and that's going to be a great place where I'm regularly posting content about podcasting and having these conversations. I post my blog up there, and I'm certainly going to be one of the first groups that's going to get access to the Podfluence chapters when they're ready to start coming out. And so that's going to be the best place. Podfluencers on YouTube, apply to join. You'll be very welcome. Come say hi. And other than that, you can find me at presentinfluence.com or find me wherever you find me on social media. I'm on most of the channels. Come say hello.
Brilliant. And if anybody has got a real high def earphones or speakers, can I just apologize? There is a little bit of a noise here in the background, and it's Penfold that is having a snore. So it's not that this podcast was boring in any shape or form. It's far from it, but he's just found the sun, and that is the sound of the most contented security guard dog in the world. It's as simple as that. Do you know what, Johnny? This has been brilliant. I wish you the best of luck with this book. I have a copy. And no, it's mine. Nobody else can have it. It's some really good stuff in there. If you're interested in podcasting, want to get started, or you're a podcaster that's sort of like finding it a little bit of a hard slog, the story at the very start of the book is a great story and will relate to so many people that have started and don't know where to go next. It's a great book. So when it's out there, genuinely go and grab yourself a copy. The worst that can happen is that if you buy a physical copy, at least you won't have a wobbly coffee table anymore. But I would suggest it'll improve the podcast. Johnny, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been a privilege. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Pleasure, Mark. Go and enjoy the sun.